approve the minutes from 6/9/2020. There's an extra 0 on there. And 6/28/2022 as submitted.
I'll move.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mrs. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Grimm?
Yes.
Mrs. Bedford?
Yes.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes, motion carried. Moving on to superintendent's reports.
Thank you, Mr. Violi. I have just one quick update for the board. Typically, at the July board meeting, you approve the handbooks for the buildings, student handbooks. However, this year, Pebble and Wagner sent out a memo advising districts to have either legal counsel or someone read the student handbooks and make sure that they align with both board policy and state law. Apparently, there's been some challenges in the past, and so they're really wanting to make sure. So we did send our handbook to Pebble and Wagner for a thorough review. They returned it yesterday. It's attached in your administrative content. So what I'd like to ask the board to do is to read through the handbooks. You'll see the notes that Dan Louder made, the corrections and changes to reflect board policy, and then we'll vote on it in August. And just so everyone knows too, that is a rough draft copy, and Sue will do all the formatting on it. But what you guys have in front of you now is what Pebble and Wagner did. So I was actually kind of excited that they offered this service this year. So we know that all of our policies and procedures align with board policy and state law. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Dalbaugh. Moving on to treasurer's report.
When I stand up, Mr. Violi looks at me sometimes. I will be quick. Sorry, guys. Oh, sorry. So today's report to the board, I'm going to go in a couple items, and they will be some quick items, but I just want to let you know. So we'll look at the June general fund for fiscal 22, the fiscal year end, what's on the horizon, and then some of the other funds that we typically don't talk about. So today's going to be food service, surround care, and athletics, and then the fraud hotline. So here is our June general fund activity. So we had monthly expenses over revenues of $1.8 million, and it's from 2 state foundation reports for receipts and disbursements for payrolls, healthcare expenses, a variety of fourth quarter purchase agreements that came at the end, hence why the disbursements were so high, utility payments, various other costs. I know it says utilities there, but that should be electric, and operational costs. So there was a slew of final invoices from purchase orders that came, probably a little bit more than normal for June. So that is something that I need to monitor, especially going into the new fiscal year. So talk about the new fiscal year. So Happy New Year. And so we closed school year 21-22, and the district is now open for school year 22-23, so that's fiscal year 23. So thank you to everybody involved, secretaries, staff, admins, and then also the treasurer's office staff. There's a lot that goes into it. So as a summary, so the cash balance at June 30th of 2022 was $8.2 million. We had encumbrances, so that's money promised through purchase orders. So we're waiting on invoices or services to be held of $240,000. So that gives an unencumbered balance of $8 million. And then for fiscal year 22, that's revenues over expenses of $1.961 million. So $1,961,000 was our revenues over expenditures. And for reference, for fiscal year 21, it's $2.5 million. In fiscal year 20, it was $613,000. So what's on the horizon for this year? Obviously, we have staff pay increases. We have our instructional needs, and that's talking to Mr. Dalbaugh, the Assistant Superintendent, the Director of Curriculum, Mr. Isle, and all the other, CJ and Andreas as well, of what is needs, especially for instruction for the kiddos. And so on the horizon, we have increase of healthcare costs. Our healthcare costs, if you remember from the riveting 5-year forecast, is up 5.2%. And then some of the other items that obviously we live in a nation and world that is going through a tough time, whatever lens that you look through. So is inflation, and that's going to hit the districts just like it hits your pocketbook and all of our community members. So just for reference, the consumer price index increased 9.1% over a year ago from June. And that was above the Dow estimate, so the market went a little bit crazy and kind of came back. And this is cost for gasoline, food. I don't need to go into it. Everybody knows what the prices at the pump and the prices just for general living expenses are. And so on the horizon for us is also increases in a variety of different things, and that's district insurance, especially purchase service and various increases that we have. And then for me, once I have an action item, the board meeting before, so next I have severance up there. That's something that I'm going to bring to the board for discussion next month. But I did want to put on the horizon so you hear something from me about severance for employees that have left. Great teachers or staff that have left. And so that's kind of like a little bit of a precursor to next month's discussion. And then, so I did want to talk about some other funds that we don't really get to talk about that much. And the three that I'm going to talk about today is food service, athletics, and surround care. These are funds that the general fund, a healthy general fund, typically means healthy other funds. That's kind of like my train of thought. So sometimes when other funds, though, either are in the negative at the fiscal year end, the general fund steps in and we do a transfer. It's basically an expense from the general fund to these other funds. This year, the food service, athletic, and surround care, that was not the case. There was no transfers from the general fund to these funds. So I just want to give a little bit of a general summary of these three funds. So, and then some more information too. So for food service, and Matt is here, and Matt's aware of these numbers, we have a June 2022 cash balance of $335,000. If you see something as revenues exceeding expenditures are a little bit different, that means that was the beginning balance at the start of the year. So all I do want to say is that fiscal 23, the year that we're entering, will be different. Fiscal 22 in terms of food service, as it currently stands, was an outlier. It sure seems like an outlier the last couple years, mainly because the district utilizing the free breakfast and lunch program over the past 2 years through the pandemic. At this point, Congress has not given the authority, appropriations, to the USDA. So what does that mean? For the past 2 years, all students, regardless of income, were eligible for free and breakfast and lunch. That is not the case going into this school year. So the finances, honestly, will be different going forward. The question is how much different? And that's something to monitor on a month-to-month basis. And so I did want to, the good news is that it is a cash positive of $326,000, and that's the great work that the food service department and team did do. It's just that we still need to keep an eye on it going forward. And the other two, these are also funds that sometimes do get transfers in from the general fund, but not this year, which is a good thing. So for surround care, the revenues exceeded expenditures, so the cash balance is $2,489. That's a good thing. Not much, but that's a good thing that they came in the positive. And you will see new rates presented in my recommendations tonight, because if you recall, the rates did change last December when we were in the negative around like $5,000 to $6,000. So those new rates did help this fund. And that's talking to Ms. Leach and stuff, and she's aware. We talked and we had a meeting, and she does agree with the rates that are going to be presented to you tonight. And then lastly for the fund is athletics. This is another fund that would have had transfers in the past, especially through COVID. but that revenues exceeded expenditures by $22,000, and the cash balance is at $22,000. And that's a big part to the athletic department, as well as the great work that we all did with the collection of the athletic fees. It was a very different case this time last year, a very different case. So these are three funds that I'm happy to report there's positive cash balances, and it's always something to look forward to and keep looking at in the future. And then the last item for you today is our fraud hotline. So in my previous employer, the state auditor's office for a while, comes out with these bulletins, and I like to read them. They're riveting. I like to read them all the time. And so one of them is updating and refreshing the fraud hotline, which we did not have. We have public records requests, we have information, but we didn't have some sort of like fraud hotline. The auditor's website that's there. So I worked with Mr. Johansson, and we have a form on the district finance as part of the website now that any fraud, if there's any complaint, it would come to me. If they do not feel comfortable, anybody complaining of coming to me, and then obviously the superintendent and CJ is involved as well, if the complaint is maybe to us or about us, then I also have a link to the Auditor of State website. So you can either do it internally or externally, and that's on the district finance as part of our website. Any questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kiffer. Moving on to the Chief Business Officer's report.
Thanks, Mr. Violi. I just have one item I'd like to discuss tonight. We'll be asking you to vote on the agreement between Streetsboro City School District and Portage Private Industry Council, or Portage Learning Centers. That is the property, not the building, because PLC owns the building, but the property next to the tech house where the Head Start program is. There was a lease agreement made 10 years ago on that property between Streetsboro City Schools and PLC. It's time for that to be renewed. They approached us about renewing and extending. There were some things in the deal that we wanted to see change or added, and so we sat down and met with them and kind of worked through some of those things. You may take a look at the agreement and say, okay, well, it's, you know, $10 a year for 10 years or whatever. That seems like very, very cheap as for rent for that property. And you're not wrong, but it's going towards a good cause, and we want to continue to be good stewards in the community and make sure that this Head Start program's offered. So I just want to read you real quick a little bit of information about PLC, what they do, and why they need our help when it comes to that, and then what we put in the agreement to help offset some of that. So Portage Private Industry Council, Portage Learning Center, it's a private, not-for-profit charitable organization. They've been the grantee of federal-funded Head Start programs since 1997 and have had a presence in the Streetsboro community since 2002. As part of the Head Start regulations, PLC is required to obtain a yearly local community match in kind of 25% of total funds received to operate each program. Each year, PLC serves 34 preschool children at the Streetsboro location, which is the maximum allowable for the facility of that size under the Head Start regulations. These children receive preschool services 7 hours a day, 4 days a week. We feel this is a significant contribution to the Streetsboro community. The difference between the nominal rate and fair market value for the leased Streetsboro City School land is allowable to count towards that 25% local match and is much appreciated by them. So when we sat with them, we found that out. And then we tried to look at some other ways that we can help this deal and make this deal great for the community, but also protect the school district as well. So one of the things that we had added into the contract was we cleaned up some language, and that language was added. We added language under number 9, which is lessee responsibility. So in the past, there's been some issues with the lift station over there, and some things that maybe were put down the lift station because that's in the back of the tech house there that shouldn't have been put down. Some charges for garbage and things like that. What we did was clean all that up and say, okay, if this happens, you're responsible for this. Even though they always were a good neighbor and just took care of it when we asked them to, when Mr. Dalbaugh asked them to. It was never a problem. They always handled it. But we just wanted to make sure that was in writing formally who's responsible for what. So that's there. And then another newly added item on this deal is number 17, the disposition of the mobile classroom upon expiration, termination, or cancellation. So our original ask to PLC was, okay, when the lease is up, if you're moving out or you're not going to be in that building, we would like, for us giving you such a discount for all these years, we would like the building, right? Because maybe we could put our own preschool in there one day, or maybe we can do something or have use of it. It is on our property, and the last thing we want is a building sitting vacant on our property, nobody using it, but we don't own the building. So we wanted to have some sort of access to that building. So what they said to us was, well, technically the federal government owns that building. We don't own that building. So like we can't just say, here you go, school district. But what we can do is there is language within their terms with the federal government where they can advocate and they can say, we would like this property to go to Streetsboro because of X, Y, and Z. And 9 out of 10 times that's granted, is what they told us. So we decided that we were going to add language in that. That doesn't mean they're going to leave after 10 years. They may want to renew in another 10, but we wanted to start setting the groundwork for the next 10 years. If I'm still fortunate enough to be in this district, then we can evaluate it then. If I'm not, it at least protects the school district when that time comes if they vacate the property. Those are the major changes that we've added to that agreement from the previous agreement. I think that it pretty much covers all of our bases. As a district, Mike's reviewed it, Kyle's reviewed it, PLC's reviewed it. We've all been in agreement with it, and it's up to the board to vote this evening on it. So I just wanted to point out the changes, explain what it is and what services they provide, so you can make an educated vote this evening. Is there any questions? That concludes my report, Mr. Violi.
Thank you, Mr. Scarpino. Moving on to board reports. Mrs. Bedford, do you have a report?
I do not.
Mrs. Campbell?
No report.
Mr. Fulton?
I don't have a report at this time, but I'm saying something positive. Recently had a soccer game here at Streetsboro, and it was very enjoyable. Streetsboro won, which is nice. And I just like the way the grounds were taken care of and everything. It's just real positive all the way around.
Thank you, Mr. Fulton. Mr. Grimm?
Yes, just briefly, the band students for the high school have been working hard all summer, doing some car washes, raising funds. Their leadership camp starts next week, followed by regular band practices, and that'll lead up to band camp and then the beginning of school. If you are at Family Days at the end of this month, look for the band booth, and you can buy your band card for only $10, and it's good, reusable discounts throughout the entire year until next August. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm. And just real quick on Maplewood, I will just say that if you have a chance to drive by the school, it's under construction right now. They're getting a little bit of a facelift. It's going to have a more modern look. I'm pretty excited about the facade change at the building, so I think it's going to look really cool when they're done with it. For a building that's over 50-something years old, it is extremely well maintained and kept up for the community. So just wanted to mention that. And that concludes the board reports. Moving on to consent agenda items. It is recommended the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items B through O.
I'll move.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any comments? As always, I'd just like to mention that the various donations that are in there, St. Joan of Arc donated $586 to the district lunch program, so they're a very nice neighbor and have always been really generous to the schools, so I just want to mention that. And that's all I have. Moving, if there's no other comments, please call the roll.
Mrs. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Bedford?
Yes.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes.
Mr. Grimm?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes, motion carried. Moving on to, I see no superintendent's recommendations, correct? You win today.
Finally. Finally.
Treasurer's recommendations.
No.
It is, item A, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the surround care fees for the 2022-2023 school year.
Motion to approve?
I'll second. We have a first and a second. Any comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Grimm?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes.
Mrs. Bedford?
Yes.
Mrs. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item B, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the Spark, agreement with Spark for Schedule A, B, B, C, D, E, E, F, and IA, beginning July 1, 2022, and ending June 30th, 2023, for a total cost of $85,773.91, as shown in the attachments.
I'll move.
Second?
We have a first and a second. Any comments?
Yes, this was very similar to a couple months ago. There were
Specifically BB. No.
There's a couple that are approved at the May board meeting just to get a possible E-rate. It's a federal program, be eligible for that. So you did approve that in May. These are the remaining agreements for this year. There is, as my comments for in May, there is a possibility that I may come back for a little bit more cash to Spark, but we're talking through a few things regarding the agreements.
And these are annual services, correct?
These are annual services. Yep.
So, please call the roll.
Mr. Violi?
Yes.
Mr. Grimm?
Yes.
Mrs. Bedford?
Yes.
Mrs. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes.
Motion carried. Moving on to Chief Business Officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Violi. I have one. It is recommended the Board of Education approve the attached lease agreement between Streetsboro City School District and Portage Private Industry Council Portage Learning Center.
I'll move.
I'll second.
We have a first and second. Comments?
No comments.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bedford?
Yes.
Mrs. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes.
Mr. Grimm?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes, motion carried. Moving on to new business. Do we have any new business? Any old business? I do have one thing.
Really?
Guess what it's about?
Here we go.
Anyhow, I had a conversation with somebody at the city, and the conversation that individual had with Mr. Chaskowski was that we may see something on the service agenda either next month or the month after. Then potentially there could be a new signage ordinance put in front of City Council. It has to go through 3 reads, but I'm hopeful to see something coming down the pike here soon. So it's been a while, but the news is that we may be seeing something shortly. So I just wanted to give you all an update. And then I have board president's recommendations. I just have item A is recommend the Board of Education approve the following new board policies and updates as shown below.
Motion to approve?
I'll second. We have a first and second. Any comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, who is the second?
I was.
Mr. Grimm?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes.
Mrs. Bedford?
Yes.
Mrs. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes.
Motion carried. And moving on to item 11, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second?
We have a first and second. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Grimm?
Yes.
Mrs. Bedford?
Yes.
Mr. Fulton?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes, motion carried. We are adjourned.